get a handle on it.
It's called an SIM. SIM. I don't know. I never bought it. My daughter got it behind. Yeah.
You're moving her this weekend, eh?
Well, I don't know what we're doing. Because I think somebody works. But I don't know. We'll have to figure it
You
out.
need a hand there, Moose?
Yeah, I don't know.
What's this?
Oh, yeah. Okay. This is where I go.
Oh yeah. It's just being
Okay.
You got internet there, so that's good. So yeah, you just need to log in.
I'm in. I logged in. I'm gonna hold the meeting now.
Miss you, Brett. Miss Marley.
Marley just misses leaving the house.
Well, you can drop her off at the office anytime. She can hang out with me super buds now. Oh, boy. You can't tell me.
Friday?
Waiting for
Yeah, Friday.
you to get back on Sunday.
Back on Monday.
That's fine, I just didn't know.
Monday at 11.
Is there-
I got my hair cut today, my beard trimmed. Feeling like $1 million, I tell you.
Maybe you should try a shower. Sometimes that works for me.
I'll do that tonight.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order.
So I picked this.
Order, I said. Okay, the town of Little Rock acknowledges that we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to our First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reconfirm our relationship with one another. Okay, well, before I adopt the agenda, I'd like to welcome one of our newest additions to the team.
Yeah,
Get
we're
Connor to
happy
introduce.
to share that Morgan Bell is on board with the town now as a community programmer as part of the community services department, and she's joined us here tonight just to see how things are run at council and to introduce herself to all of you.
Welcome.
Hey, Marty.
Hello. Welcome.
Yeah, I think I know most of you, but my name's Morgan and I'm excited to be working for the town now. Have a lot of ideas for programming.
Exciting. Awesome.
You'll do good.
Yeah, you'll do well, and I really look forward to the coming programming, evenings and
Yay.
weekends. Yay! For youth, yay! And adults.
For everyone, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I think it's one of the things that we appreciate to see stepping up and with your experience, and look forward to what we're going to see over the next months and years.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions? I think we got a pretty full agenda.
I'll move to adopt as presented.
I'll second.
By Councilor Bouchard, second by Councilor Bedry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried. We move to adoption of minutes of the February 28th meeting. Any errors or omissions or presented?
I move to adopt the minutes as presented.
Okay. Moved by Councilor Wu, seconder.
I'll
Councilor
second
Hunt. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, any business or questions arising from the minutes? If not, we will move to delegations, and I see we have some activity on the screen here. Okay, we've got Crosby Hanna and Associates on online here. Just going to run over some of the highlights of our corridor plan. Just we'll test it out, see if we can hear you.
We ready?
Yeah. Okay.
Alright, good stuff. Alright, shall I just take it away?
Yep.
Alright, sounds great. So my name is William Rankin. I'm a landscape architect with Crosby Hanna, and I led this project from start till now. I'm also the one responsible for assembling the document that you all have had a chance to review, and that we'll review briefly tonight. Just a quick overview of some of the others on the team. Alan Wallace, he's a planner with Wallace Insights. He did all of the background research with respect to the economic conditions and the development recommendations. Brenda Wallace, she's probably the most familiar to everyone here. She led the engagement sessions met with council, met with a bunch of other people in town, and is the sort of the, for all intents and purposes, the face of this project to the town of Orange. And Kevin Traves is an engineer with BCL Consulting here in Saskatoon, and he led all of the preliminary roadway and servicing engineering and all the cost estimation. So really briefly, that is the team that put this document together. I am going to share my screen, and then my plan is just to spend about 15 minutes walking really briefly through the document, just giving some high-level overview of that. We can stop at any point to answer some questions. Yeah, whatever works for this group.
I think if you go through your presentation and then we'll take the questions at the end.
That's good. Okay. So, my screen is visible to everybody?
Yes, it is.
Perfect. Alright, so the document that you all had a chance to review, I would consider this a 99.9% document. Essentially all the content is done, but there's still a little bit of formatting left to do. So we'll be wrapping that up later this week, and we'll turn over the final document shortly. So the purpose of this master plan, I'm sure you're all familiar with, was just to create a long-term planning document, give the town of Orange something to take advantage of its position as the gateway to the north. We all know that the highway is busy, but in its current state, it's a little underutilized. It just doesn't fully benefit the town. So we wanted to do this master plan to include a focus on physical and economic development. The master plan meets a number of objectives. It creates a revitalization plan. It identifies phases of development, focusing on some high priority areas first. It addresses servicing of the infrastructure needs, and it also creates some capital budgeting to help with short, medium, and long-term planning and implementation. The document is organized in 7 sections. The first few sections are all just information gathering. They really include a focus on evaluation of existing conditions, so that we knew what our starting point was for moving forward. Section 5 is the master plan itself, all the physical improvements and the strategies to take advantage of the economic conditions. Section 6 is a very brief section, just having a look on theming and potential brand development. And section 7 is just a phasing and implementation strategy, and that's where the cost estimation is as well, to really help the town get a handle on how to phase and implement the project. So a large part of the entire process was really getting to know the town, getting to know the economic and the market analysis, getting to know the physical conditions, getting to know what the town was all about and where we needed to, so that we had a baseline of where to go. So Alan, with Wallace Insights, started this process with his economic profile, and this became a starting point for developing all the strategies later on in the master planning process. This profile included some population analysis of Orange, but also of the tri-community area, some land use analysis and a review of vacant and occupied lands, land ownership and how this might affect future growth, and just a general review of the economic situation of Orange. The end result of this was a culmination of background information and a detailed list of development opportunities and constraints. And what we found was that there are two main opportunities. The first opportunity is to develop a highway corridor. We all knew this was the main priority. This was the focus of the whole project. We're looking at 2 main spots, 2 main locations on the highway as sort of priority spaces: a south node near the south town entrance and a future north node near the north town entrance. But an important second opportunity was to develop the waterfront of the downtown area, which we identified as simply was really key early on in the process, and I know that the town is now undertaking some additional studies for those areas, so that's really great to see that go ahead. But essentially the main takeaway from the economic and market analysis is that there's a lot of room for potential growth, maybe even too much room for potential development. We really need to try and focus in on where to first prioritize this growth so that we really create some sort of a good starting point. Where we best focus this work, this focused development. So similar to developing and understanding the economic environment, we really need to get a good understanding of the physical conditions of the highway. So the highway corridor was evaluated with a number of criteria, including a safety audit. We spent some time just reviewing physical safety and opportunities for criminal or other unwanted behavior and how to design those types of situations out of the future. We did a detailed streetscape review, which is the bulk of the analysis in section 3. We looked at pathways, we looked at signage, all the information that is available for visitors when they were traveling to and passing through the corridor. We took a great look at the existing vegetations and other natural features, and just a general review of the conditions that you see as you drive through the space. The one thing we found was that this is a pretty typical set of conditions along the highway. We found it was really kind of an interesting place to walk through, certainly a different experience walking through the space than it was for driving through the space. It was really, really interesting. I think this top image really highlights sort of what I felt about the highway corridor from a pedestrian perspective. They're interesting pathways, not all of them are very constructed, they're all kind of, they just happened. But you've got this great play between the pathways that just happened and some really interesting natural features in the site that I think are worth highlighting as the space gets developed. We also worked with the Ministry of Highways a little bit, because as you all know, they are looking at a detailed highway functional study of the entire corridor, not only through La Grange, but points north a little bit, and through Air Ronde and further south. And so we discussed the plan with the ministry, and honestly, the discussion wasn't nearly as much as we wanted it to be. Highways seemed to be a little reluctant to sharing a lot of information, but what we did have is some success on this. Initial highway designs through this space really seemed to focus on, from the Ministry of Highways perspective, seemed to focus on creating an urban cross section. So that's something that was, there's no curbs, the drainage is all through ditches. It's just a very unstructured design. But we felt that the corridor, especially in some of the nodes of development we're trying to create, should be more of an urban cross section. So we talked to the Highway Ministry about this a little bit. And although the final highway design is not complete, the most recent communication with their design team indicates that they're starting to think along the same lines as us with regards to the development in some of these key nodes. So they're looking at more of an urban cross section, something that's more conducive to the kind of development that we're hoping will be created along the highway. In addition to economic analysis and physical conditions analysis, we also really want to get a good understanding of the community's needs and desires for this project. So Brenda Wallace undertook a couple of engagement initiatives to gain that understanding. Initial engagement was conducted with a bunch of various administrative groups and key stakeholders that included council and administration, included the business community, including the chambers of commerce, various government representatives, including the Ministry of Energy Resources, Highways, Saskatchewan Trade and Development, tourism representatives, and the RCMP and fire services. Basically, a lot of the groups that had a significant stakeholder, that really were significant stakeholders through this area. The initial engagement first included a review of the economic profile that Alan Wallace had created, and it included a series of one-on-one and small group interviews and key discussions with a bunch of different people. And it concluded essentially with a long list of ideas, strengths, and constraints that we took forward to influence the design as things continue to move forward with the design. Excuse me. Public engagement was also key importance to the project. We wanted to give the community a chance to provide input, but also to increase their buy-in in the project. And the more input that they felt like they had, the more likely they are to understand and adopt, understand the importance and adopt this kind of process. So the public engagement consisted essentially of a virtual open house posted on the town's website, included opportunities to respond by completing a survey after they had a chance to read through some materials and have a look at the plans. In my opinion, the public engagement had some mixed success with a bit of a limited response. They only had 34 people responding to the survey. But the responses that we all received were very complete, they were thoughtful, and they affirmed a lot of the decisions and the directions that were provided by council and other significant stakeholders. So although the responses weren't as many as I thought, I felt like the quality of responses that we got back was actually quite good. Overall, I think a successful engagement process. So all of the previously discussed information was collected, reviewed, analyzed, and used to inform the actual creation of the master plan here in section 5. And as we started to really look at this information, it quickly became clear that there's a number of key opportunities that we can take a look at to provide fast and direct benefits to the town. So we'll go through these a little bit more in detail, but essentially we classified primary, secondary, and a quick review of things outside of the study area. So the primary considerations include things like targeting specific development types of the corridor, improving access points along the highway, improving signage, expanding servicing to the new developments, all of the types of things that we would expect to see. But there were a number of secondary considerations that were probably equally as important, although less directly influential, at least on a visible perspective. So things like improving some of the connections to the roadways in and around the highway corridor, establishing and enforcing development standards for new developments and even existing developments, and then developing a stronger trail network along the highway. The third category of improvements is outside of the master plan study that we've already talked about, a lakefront revitalization project on Orange, master planning of the waterfront area, those types of things. This report doesn't deal with those at all. We just create some suggestions that those should be looked at. So I don't know how well you can see these maps on your screen, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through them, but we'll just quickly highlight some of the key takeaways from the master plan process itself. So a few of the primary considerations. One, we wanted to develop a full service truck stop, and that's right along the bend at the south end of town. This provides a missing but really key service for the trucking industry. And really anyone driving through the space would benefit from that as well. We wanted to provide new, fully serviced commercial developments in key nodes along the highway. And one of the primary spaces to look at was immediately north of that new truck stop space. And we also wanted to establish a new value-added business park, and that's this blue sort of triangular space. Now it's important to understand, for this space, we're not simply adding an industrial zone land, parcel of land. There's lots of industrial areas around the highway already, probably too much. This is specifically targeted at attracting value-added businesses related to mining, mineral extraction, forestry, agribusiness, that kind of thing. Really, the focus is to try and create a local value-added stream of products and processes rather than just shipping everything out of the town to be processed elsewhere. And we understand that the provincial and federal governments are both looking at significant future investments in this kind of industry, so this positions the town of Orange in a great place to take advantage of some of that. Highway access was of key importance, and one of the things we wanted to talk to highways about a lot. We're suggesting creating a handful of new access points, improving some of the existing access points, and even closing and decommissioning some of the existing access points, which is a key safety consideration for the Ministry of Highways. They already feel like there's too many accesses off the highway, and so strengthening a handful and eliminating some of the ones that are not as used is something they would be very interested in, especially if they're looking at more of an urban cross-section for this road. Another thing that we wanted to propose was the creation of some new connector roads, and this is to access some of the highway commercial areas, some new connector roads that go through these highway commercial that connect to some of the areas in town, and this would also provide a service road essentially for the proposed RCP relocation right here, right adjacent to the fire hall. Another thing we wanted to really focus on was these buffers. There are a number of places where there's existing vegetation on the site, and the map further to the north, which we'll get to later, shows us more, but essentially those provide really important buffers from existing residential areas from the highway. And some of the other proposed areas of commercial development were including a proposal that we increase the amount of buffer space or create new buffer space just to maintain that level of privacy. We wanted to also take a look at some secondary conditions. Now, one of the things that we identified fairly early on as we drove around the town was there seemed to be a bit of a disconnect from the town, between the town and the highway itself. There were only a handful of connection points, and they were great, they're good, strong connections, but if we're trying to increase and really develop a strong mode of commercial development, improving the connections between the town and that space would be really key for the success of that space. So coming off of L'Orange Avenue, there's a lot of residential roads and some in the commercial districts that are all essentially dead-end roads. They just end at this point, which from a residential perspective, is kind of nice. It creates a nice quiet street. But what it does do is provide strong connections to ensure the health of these commercial areas. So we're proposing a new connector road and improving the conditions of these existing roads to really provide some good, strong access to this initial road development. Now, we know that there's some really challenging grade conditions in this space. I've walked that area a few times. I spent some time in the proposed truck stop area looking up at the houses on the top of that hill. It's not going to be easy, but with some careful engineering, I feel like we can make a strong connection with similar alignment to this to really service that whole area. Another really critical secondary consideration is to develop a set of development standards for the highway development. This is going to elevate the appearance of the entire highway corridor. And I think really creating something that is good for the new development is key, but also recommending strategies to improve the appearance of existing industrial development along the highway will go a long way too. Some selective screening in some places or providing some minimal site enhancements to existing properties can make these properties appear a lot nicer than they currently do along the highway, and would really make the whole highway corridor look a lot better. And then the last secondary condition I wanted to mention briefly is to increase the amount of public art along the highway. La Ronge has some really interesting and unique examples of local art in some of the parks. There's some really fantastic examples of locally inspired architecture. And I think this project presents a great opportunity to highlight some of these interesting features, this interesting part of the town's identity, by placing some prominently displayed public art. And this plan locates some potential areas where that might happen. Really quickly, I want to talk about theming, and I don't want to spend much time here because it's incidental to the focus of the master plan, but essentially we recommend that all physical improvements and any potential rebranding activities be done in a way that celebrates La Ronge's local identity. Through our site observations, and especially through our discussions during the public open house engagement process, it really became clear that local identity for La Ronge is embedded within the northern context. It's highly focused on the natural landscape, and it includes a color palette that celebrates this northern environment. So here's just a couple of images that were provided to us to sort of highlight the natural beauty of the site, or of the town and the surrounding area. And it really does provide some inspiring colors. So we're proposing that La Ronge take a look at creating a refreshed brand and focusing some theme development on this whole northern context, something fresh, something bright, something that can be used for a strong rebranding campaign to promote the town and attract new businesses and investors to the area. The last section of the document is section 7, phasing and implementation. And the key to success for the short and the long-term time frames we really feel like is a focused and concentrated development. We suggest this for a couple of reasons. Concentrated development in just one or two focused areas will help with implementation and capital planning. Infrastructure is expensive. If you don't have to do it in one or two spots, your money goes a lot further. This focused development will also strengthen the visual impact of development and make the development look more intentional, as opposed to a random scattering of popped-up developments along the highway corridor. Focusing it all in one area really makes have better bang for the buck. And initially, and ideally, this is going to create a critical mass of services in one space that will encourage additional development and investment in the area and in adjacent parcels. So essentially, we want to try and create a critical mass that is almost self-sustaining, self-expanding, and just is going to continue to attract more development. So the master plan recommends a 3-phase approach to development. So phase 1 is the new truck stop and highway commercial right beside it. This is where we feel like a lot of the initial commercial development should be focused. Phase 2 is the business park immediately across the highway from this space. Now I think phase 1 and phase 2 can actually be developed at more or less the same time. They don't compete with each other, they offer different services, they are operating completely different economic parts of the town. So just as opportunities arise, phase 1 and phase 2 can develop more or less concurrently if they need to. Phase 3 is on the far north of the town. So this, just for context, is the fairground, the Elks Fairground up here. So just south of that, all this orange area is a potential future new highway commercial. Now this is all zoned, I think, commercial as it is. But we really recommend that development we don't look at development here until long-term in the future. We want to try and focus on the south areas first. Once that area fills up, then we can start to consider these spaces up here. This section also includes a cost analysis for roadway improvements to assist with capital planning. This includes all new roads, all roadway improvements, but it doesn't include internal subdivision roads. We don't know what those will look like until the subdivisions are actually designed and planned. And we don't know what that all looks like until we know which businesses are going in there, because they all might have very specific ideas and requirements. So we include the main infrastructure improvements that the town is going to be responsible for, but there might be development-specific infrastructure that just can't account for at this point. The section also takes a good look at some preliminary design considerations for utilities, water and sewer, including cost estimation, again, for future capital planning. And again, we only include this area primarily for the south end of the development. We don't feel that the north end, the North Miller development is going to happen anytime soon, and any kind of projections that we put for that space is just not going to be realistic in the time frame of this master plan. And finally, this section also includes some consideration for financing and funding models just to help the town with implementation. So the funding models might range from installing development charges or applying for government grants, utility surcharges, taking a good look at the mill rates and making adjustments there. But the primary recommendation is to create a LaRonge-specific strategy to fund this that's really clear and really easily communicated to potential investors, because clear communication is really the key element to remove uncertainty for investors and encourage people to get involved in new business opportunities in the town. We also include a really brief appendix that includes some examples of various retail, just examples of retail opportunities. The information I think is clear, so we're not going to review at this meeting. But the information is there for you if you need it. So that's the document in a nutshell, a really quick overview. So thank you for your patience as I quickly went through that. It was a bit of a whirlwind. Any questions? Any discussion?
Well, thanks, William, for the presentation, and thanks to Crosby and Associates for a great job. This is very exciting for the town. It's something that we can market, you know, just having the concept drawings and the layout and you know, planning approaches and all of this. You know, it's something we can market. It's something we may have to negotiate with highways ourselves, and it makes it a lot easier for us to say, hey, this is what we need, and this is the drawing we've got here, and we need your rubber stamp. So thank you for all that. Now we'll look at your questions.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hi, William. It's Jeff Long here. I know you can't see me, and we've talked lots over the phone, but I just wanted to provide some clarification to Council. You were talking earlier about the role of the Ministry of Highways as it relates to future design and reconstruction of the intersections and what have you through the corridor. You had alluded to the fact that they were looking at an urban design, but in actual fact they're looking at a rural design. And through this process and the feeding of information to the ministry as part of the master plan development, they have sort of changed their opinion, if you will, and are thinking more along the lines of an urban type of design through LaRonge. And so that'll be of assistance, obviously, in trying to achieve some of the objectives we have to implement this plan over the long term. Thank you.
Any comments, questions, councillors?
Thank you so much for the work that your business did for us on that. I read through it all and it looked good.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Oh, I'm good. Okay.
That's well done.
Okay, go ahead.
I will communicate through Jeff, but there's a couple of contextual things I wanted to see clarified, but that's for later. So it was a great plan. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Well, I've noted a few spelling mistakes. I've noted a few references that are missing. So we're going to be spending a couple of hours in the next few days just cleaning up those details. So anything that you do notice, please communicate to Jeff. He can get those to us, and then we'll include any of those changes in the final draft.
No problem.
I think that goes the same to any other councillors. You see something that, you know, just speak to Jeff about it, and he'll be lay that down.
I've read the report too many times, Your Worship, for me to see any more.
Okay, well, thanks again, and we look forward to the final draft.
Thank you, William.
Well, thank you all.
Tentative draft, I guess. Thank you.
Take care, bye.
Okay, we want to possibly entertain adjusting the agenda, seeing we have some people here that, or,
I don't know which issue it's with regards to, so I couldn't tell you.
no, I just thought the in-camera item, but it's way at the end of the meeting, and I don't, if they wanna sit here right till the end. Just be-
You guys wanna sit here until the end of the meeting and hang out with us? Just figured I'd ask.
It's up to council, I mean, we can just carry on.
I-
with it.
Would
I
you
don't
like to
mind.
carry on, please?
I don't mind, whatever.
I don't mind going in camera and getting that done, but
Fine to adjust too.
I'm fine to adjust.
I'm fine to adjust.
Adjusted, okay.
Viviana? you're
Yeah,
fine?
yeah. I was
Okay,
going to
we'll,
say, I move to adjust the meeting to accommodate the delegations.
Second the motion,
A second.
all in favor?
Right.
Motion carries.